When I was growing up in New Zealand, we always had a compost bin in the garden. It was just part of normal gardening life. Here in Thailand, it's unfortunately not so common. Recently, we bought a couple of truckloads of the rice straw from a neighbour, and as they were delivering it, I was sort of like a bit puzzled. It's like, what are you going to do with all of this? It's like, well, most of it I'll make into compost or use it as mulch. We need it. And as I was building these new compost bins and getting them working, getting them filled, and really enjoying the experience of making compost again, I had a lovely memory. Many years ago, when I worked as a photographer in a newspaper in New Zealand, one of the jobs that would pop up every now and again would get a call from somebody who'd grown a large piece of fruit or a large vegetable, and could you send a photographer to take a photograph of it? And I didn't always have the best, attitude about this. It was never going to be, in my mind, an exciting job or a great picture. But one day we went out to this couple that had grown a large cauliflower, and maybe it was a slow news day, maybe it was a slow news week, but this was going to be a story in the newspaper, and I had to take a photograph of this man with his cauliflower. I got there and arrived at the people's home, and it was beautiful. It was a very simple wooden house. I think it was an ex-state house, probably built shortly after the Second World War for soldiers who were returning home to provide good housing for them. And this couple had lived there since they'd been married, and they were, I think, well into their 70s, maybe even in their 80s. So they'd been there a long time. It was their home, and their garden was absolutely magnificent. The front part of the garden in front of the house was all flowers and mainly roses, and then at the back was all of the vegetable garden, and it was pristine. Everything was just fantastic. And sure enough, this man's cauliflower was impressive. It was larger than a dinner plate and absolutely perfect. There was no sort of pieces that were separating or springing up or anything. It was just gorgeous. But what I remember most, there was two things I remember most about meeting this couple, was the one conversation that they had between the two of them about their compost. They didn't have one lot of compost. They had her compost and his compost. And she was, she said, oh, I get all the kitchen scraps, anything that comes through my kitchen, that's mine. And it might not be as much quantity as what he gets from all his lawn clippings and all the leaves that he rakes and stuff like that. But she said, I have the best quality compost, and mine just makes the best compost, and this is why my flowers are so good. He was quite happy with all his lawn clippings and the bulk of his compost, and it certainly worked, this fabulous big cauliflower and all of the other vegetables in his garden. And it was just such a fun thing. They were so passionate about making good compost that it really impressed upon me. But the other part of the conversation that I'd remembered, and this is something that I'd forgotten, this man gave me some tomato seeds, and he told me the story that is very similar to my Uncle Leo's story about tomatoes. This gentleman had been serving as a soldier during the Second World War in Italy, and he'd returned home with a packet of tomato seeds that he'd harvested from the tomatoes that they'd been growing in Italy when he'd been stationed there. And he'd been growing them ever since. So he gave me some of these seeds. And a while later, I'd mentioned this to my mum, and she said, well, we've got tomato seeds that your great uncle Leo brought back from the war as well. And I'm still growing these same tomatoes. Not the ones from the gentleman with the compost and the cauliflower, but certainly from my Uncle Leo's. But it kind of got wondering when I was thinking about this recently, is like, maybe these two guys served together. Maybe they knew each other. When I met this old gentleman, when I was taking his photo for the newspaper, I didn't know about my Uncle Leo's tomatoes then. I was young. I wasn't so much into gardening. Maybe I was just beginning to grow my own garden back then. I would have been in my early 20s, I guess. But it was just such a lovely memory, and the thought of being able to grow heirloom tomatoes in really good compost is fantastic, and it's just wonderful that here I am living in Thailand many, many years later and enjoying both good compost and great tomatoes. So Just thought I'd make this little video, share a little bit of a story, share a little bit of history, but the story and the passion for compost was something that really stuck with me, and certainly the fruits of the compost, the amazing cauliflower that this guy had grown, and then the tomatoes, which just keep on coming and coming and coming every year. So be encouraged, make some good compost. If you've never done it before, start today. Just start using any of your kitchen waste, any of your food scraps that is natural and as organic as possible. Layer it with some wood chips or some dry leaves or some straw or any other dry matter, so that you've got that good mixture of green and brown, the nitrogen and the carbon, and start giving it back to the soil. Then you'll be able to grow bigger and more beautiful fruits and vegetables and flowers in your garden. I hope you've enjoyed my little story. Thanks for watching. So please click the like button and subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. And if you'd like to learn something more about what we're doing here with compost at Suansook Homestay, please check out this video here and enjoy watching that as well.